All right, we're going to do second part of this second section today, the causes producing world glamour. This should be interesting, as always. The causes producing world glamour can be broken or divided into three groups. Planetary causes, B, causes initiated by humanity itself, and causes induced by any individual person, which are nevertheless founded and based in the two above groups of conditioning factors. Founded and based in the two above groups of conditioning factors. The planetary causes, these causes are two in number and beyond your finite comprehension. I only state them and ask you to accept them as reasonable speculations and possible accurate hypotheses. The first one being causes inherent in substance itself. And this is something that we've heard quite a bit. The substance seems to be in a very real way recycled and has in it these causes are inherent in it, and karma inherent in it, and all different things. Very interesting. The atoms of which all forms are made have been inherited from an earlier universe or solar system and are therefore tinged with or colored by the results of that great creative manifestation. So even if they're tinged with it, it could be recognized slightly here now. Well, of course, right. The effects produced in that expression of divine existence constitute predisposing factors or initiating causes in this solar system and planetary life. These conditioning and inherited factors cannot be evaded. They determine the nature of the life urge, the trend of the evolutionary unfoldment, and the innate tendencies which all forms possess, such as the capacity to grow and to unfold, to orient the type, and to express in time and space the archetype or pattern, and to outline and determine the structure of the kingdom into which science divides the natural world. These are but a few of the innate inherent characteristics of substance itself, inherited and conditioned by our present manifestation of divine life. It cannot be evaded. They determine the nature of the life urge. It's almost like they're providing they're providing what is to be transmuted and transformed. So we're working to transmute and transform that, it seems. Okay, so it's a continuation in a sense. Life goes on in an even greater sense than we're normally thinking of that. The life or manifestation of the planetary logos, the one in whom we live and move and have our being, is determined by his own nature. To us, that great life embodies perfection, and the qualities which distinguish him are those which we direct our highest aspiration. But from the angle of those lives who are ahead of him upon the cosmic path, I speak symbolically and in terms of human experience. He is among the imperfect gods. These imperfections hindering unfoldment or the perfect expression of divine energy, when brought into conjunction with the inherited qualities and biases of the substances through which he must express his life. His purposes and intentions produce the seeds of death and of decay, which characterize our planetary evolution in all the four kingdoms in nature. Wow, okay, that seems accurate. You can't get around that. That's very profound. They create the obstacles, obstructions, and hindrances against which the soul in all created forms must struggle, gaining strength and understanding thereby and eventual liberation. These are the two major planetary causes that cannot finally deter the soul from emancipation, but they can and do hinder and delay. It is useless for men to speculate upon these hypotheses. With their present inadequate equipment and type of brain, nothing would be achieved and you would be none the wiser, certainly. We can just stay right on the surface of that and keep on going. Causes initiated by humanity itself. Slowly, step by step, humanity has created and intensified that glamorous condition of consciousness, which we call the astral plane. All glamour is produced by the bringing together of one or more streams of energy, which produce a temporary whirlpool of energies, and from the angle of man, the onlooker and participator produce a condition of darkness, a state of bewilderment, which makes clear choice and right discrimination difficult, and in the early stages impossible. It creates an aura in which is today of such a general nature and so all-enveloping that everybody is, figuratively speaking, immersed in it. And we're, what would we say, underwater? We're drowning in a sense, right? This aura in the infancy of the race only surrounded the more advanced people. To understand what I mean by this statement, I'll call your attention to the fact that very unintelligent people, those who are among the lowest human types and those who are little more than active animals, governed primarily by the instincts, are apt to deal very simply and with complete directness with the facts of existence with which they are faced and which to them are of paramount or sole importance. The facts of hunger, of birth and death, of self-protection and perpetuation. There is little true glamour in their reaction to life and living, and their simplicity, like that of a child, saves and protects them from many of the subtler ills. Their emotions are not subtle and their minds are unawakened. But as humanity evolved and the higher levels of the racial consciousness became more subtle and the mind factor slowly became more active, then glamour and illusion developed very rapidly. And you can see how these things would certainly compound. The first indications of glamour arose when the disciples and the aspirants of the Lemurian world, whose problem was the right comprehension, correct functioning, control of the physical body, began to differentiate between themselves as self-conscious beings and physical and vital forces. That immediately set up a tremendous activity in the throat center, which is the higher aspect of the sacral center, or the sex center, and thus led to the initial glamour and to the first definite recognition and consideration of the sex impulse, of sex attraction, and for the initiate of that period of the necessary sex transmutation. This went hand in hand with the earliest yoga, or the cult of the physical body, with the objective of its control by the soul and the consequent merging of the conscious and the subconscious. Around the aspirants of that time could then be seen gathering the first clouds and fogs of glamour, though illusion was nowhere present. first recognition of the plane of the emotions of the astral plane was evoked in the consciousness of the groups under preparation for the first initiation, which was the highest initiation possible at that time. The reason for this slowly emerging astral consciousness in the physically polarized aspirant of the time was due to the fact that one of the secrets of initiation consists in the right understanding and use of the consciousness, which is aware and capable of functioning upon a plane higher than that on which humanity as a whole is at any given time living. Hence, in Lemurian times, the physically centered man who was on the verge of admission to the path was aware of, one, the physical duality wherein his consciousness was accustomed to functioning normally, and of the conflict between the physical body per se and the vital etheric body. Two, a dimly sensed higher consciousness, which was distinguished by quality and sentiency. This was all that he could at the time contact upon the most familiar plane today, the astral. The growing sense of self-identity, three, the growing sense of self-identity, which was the awakening soul or self, the master who was led to him out of the purely physical consciousness into the next divine stage, the astral consciousness. Forget not, through familiarity and fatigue of conflict, the divinity of each developing step. Sorry, I'm thinking that at some point, so the astral plane was barely even present. But the mental plane would have been, I'm not sure. That's interesting. I'm thinking I remember him talking about something like, we're talking about this earlier, either in this book or it might be in White Magic. Okay, sorry. Thus, it will be apparent to you if the above is a true statement of fact that glamour arose from the recognition of these factors in consciousness and was the result of man's reactions to the complexities of his own constitution and to the energy of his own soul. Very, very deep stuff there. As time went on, the entire human family became aware of the new emerging dualism existing between the physical constitution and the astral plane, plus the activity of the center within himself, which at this stage made its appearance as conscience and innate, and at that time unreasoning realization of an urge to higher living or a tendency to lower activity. This nebulous conscience development eventually into what we call the voice of conscience. This nebulous conscience developed eventually into what we call the voice of conscience. When that took place, the intricacy and the difficulty of life was greatly increased, and glamour was definitely established on Earth. Plus the activity of the center within himself, which at this stage made its appearance. Okay, so I don't want to skip past this. This is pretty big deal. The entire human family became aware of the new emerging dualism existing between the physical constitution and the astral plane, plus the activity of the center within himself, which at this stage made its appearance as conscience and innate, set back in, and at that time, unreasoning realization of an urge to higher living or a tendency to, okay, so that's that's how, I guess we could say the soul was being expressed during that, was making itself known at that time. When that took place, the intricacy and the difficulty of life was greatly increased, and glamour was definitely established on earth. It was that which enfolded and overemphasized the lower at the expense of the higher, and served to distract the attention of the aspirant away from reality. And this is still happening, right? May I again reemphasize that at this early stage, glamour was only evoked by and recognized by the highly evolved people of that period. Then the Lemurian race was slowly passed away and the Atlantean race came into existence. During the millions of years, this race flourished on Earth. During the millions of years that this race flourished on Earth, there were vast numbers of people with the Lemurian consciousness flourishing at the same time. Just as today in this modern Aryan race, there are many, many millions of people who express the Atlantean consciousness and are polarized in their astral bodies, the victims of emotion and of consequent glamour. In the Atlantean race, the physical duality was then solved, and the physical body and the etheric body constituted a unity. And in the healthy person still do so. The sense of duality shifted then into a growing recognition of the conflict in the realm of quality and into the field of what we today call the pairs of opposites, good and evil, pain and pleasure, right and wrong, sense and nonsense, and the multiplicity of opposites by which the aspirant is today faced. Each of these racial histories sees the establishing of a temporary sense of unity in the early stages, when the previous cleavage had been healed and the initial duality had been resolved into a unity. Then there comes a growing recognition of a fresh realm of choice based upon the emergence of the higher values, and finally a period of conflict in the consciousness of the individual and of humanity as a whole, as the attempt is made to resolve this higher duality with which the man or the race is confronted. Since from at one-ment to at one-ment, again, it's just a newer at one-ment. Really, we're just continuing on over very vast periods of time, apparently. Even though it's all present now, but in this present, when we're reading this is from my perspective, but these books are taking the bewilderment out of the human experience. It's explaining in detail with nothing left to the imagination, essentially. We're filling in all the gaps to where it can be understood in a very clear way. And this is what we need for this point. The history of this becomes something that we can see, essentially. And this is great. This resolution is brought about when a higher aspect of the consciousness is dimly visioned and men become aware of themselves as mental beings. There is then a growing demand for that mind nature to be developed and brought into play in the effort to solve the problem in this category of opposites upon the astral plane. Sure, that's exactly what we're saying. At the same time, the sense of self-identity or of the consciousness that I am is steadily growing. and the initiate of the day faces the effort to release himself from the thraldom of the senses upon the astral plane, from the dense glamour into which his sensory perception has thrown him, and to establish his freedom by a complete control of the astral body. This he eventually does by developing the power to pass between the pairs of opposites, unaffected by either, and thus leave them behind. He accomplishes this by using the mind as a distributor of the light, which reveals the middle way and which dissipates the glamour with its brilliance and radiance. We're holding steady at that point. This glamour has steadily deepened and intensified as more and more people have succeeded in resolving the initial physical cleavage and have become centered in the astral consciousness. This has become deepened and intensified. That's intense, because I guess that's because you have more, it's compounded again somehow. Interesting. Today, such is the magnitude of this clamor and such the success of the evolutionary process that humanity as a whole is wandering in the fogs and miasmas of the world of sentient consciousness. Certainly, man, it's scary, right? It is. It's not funny. It is cosmic, in a weird way, right? When I use the word sentient, I do not refer to the sensory apparatus of the physical nervous system, but to the sentient awareness of the self, which is today so immersed in glamour that the mass of men are entirely identified with the world of feeling, of quality, of sentient interplay, and of emotional reactions, with their likes and dislikes and their dominant self-pity. Self-pity is one of the major glamours of the advanced and sensitive man. It is the advanced people who contribute the most to the world glamour. The major glamour is the reaction of the aspirant to the truth, to reality, when he first becomes aware of that which lies beyond the astral plane. He interprets all that he there senses and sees in terms of glamour, of emotional understanding, and of sentient fanaticism. He forgets that truth lies beyond the world of feeling altogether, unaffected by it, and can only be sensed in its purity when feeling is transcended and transmuted. The second major glamour is self-pity. And this makes a lot of sense. We have to recognize that truth lies beyond the world of feeling altogether. And that's something that seems, beliefs, thoughts creep in, and then we're like, we go follow them, like, oh, something shiny over here. And then we go follow it. And we forget that the truth lies beyond the world of feeling altogether. And the truth can only be sensed in its purity when feeling is transcended and transmuted. This is a huge statement right here. Forget that truth. I'm going to have to come back to that later. That's incredible. The world today is divided into three groups, all of whom are subject to certain phases of glamour. Those who are in the Atlantean, those who are Atlantean in their consciousness and are therefore completely glamored by A, that which is material and to be desired, B, that which they feel in all relationships, C, that which they believe to be ideal, to be true or just based on their reactions to the thinkers of the day, but which they themselves do not mentally understand. D, that which they demand of beauty and of emotional comfort, and E, that which brings to them spiritual comfort in the realm of religion and religious desire. Note the phrasing, and I think we can all absolutely, in a sense, feel this, empathize with this, see that this is the Atlantean consciousness is not we're all that, right? Until we're not, until we're on the path, I think, essentially, until we're moving, this is an interesting thing here. All right, but we're about to see, that's my thought on it. I could be wrong, don't listen. Here we go, we're going. Number 2, those who are more definitely Aryan in their consciousness. This means that the mind factor is awakening and thus constituting a difficulty, and that the illusions of the mental plane are now added to the glamours of the astral plane. These illusions are theoretical and intellectual in nature. All right, so this is completely normal. This behavior is from the Atlantean consciousness up here, with the illusion of the mind, the mental illusion is just added onto it, and that's what we've got in the definitely more Aryan consciousness. 3, a group of people who are emerging out of those subject to glamour and illusion, and who are alive to the voice of the silence and to the demands of the soul. Okay, that's definitely advanced at that point, right? The complexity of the modern psychological problem lies in the fact that our race in periods sees the synthesis of all the glamours and the emergence of the illusions of the mental plane. Today, we have aspirants at all stages of unfoldment and find the masses recapitulating the different steps upon the evolutionary way, with the lowest layer of the human race definitely Lemurian in their consciousness, even though few in numbers, relatively speaking. But nevertheless, we're all here, the whole crew. Everyone's here. Illusion is rapidly growing as the mental power of the race develops. For illusion is the succumbing to the powerful thought forms which the thinker of the time and of the immediately preceding age have formulated, and which at the time of their creation constituted the hope of the race. They embodied then the new and emerging ideas by means of which the race was intended to progress. These forms, when old and crystallized, become a menace and a hindrance to the expanding life. Interesting. The realization of the problems of illusion lies centuries ahead, when the race will have left glamour behind, when there will be a few Atlantean-minded people on the planet, and when there will be no people at all with the Lemurian consciousness. However, as evolution proceeds, things are greatly speeded up, and the time when humanity will be predominantly distinguished by the Aryan consciousness is not as far ahead as might be generally supposed. I'm not sure about that table on 113. I'll have to check that out. I speak not in terms of the Aryan race as it is generally understood today, or in its Nordic implications. Let me do this. Is that going to work? Oh, that's not going to work. Let me see about this. All right, and then we have, last but not least, the causes initiated by the individual. So you can see, this is the top-down kind of thing. It's all-encompassing, really. It's from the inside out and the outside in. So here we go. If you have studied all the above with the needed care, it will be apparent to you that the individual man enters upon incarnation already handicapped by existing glamour of very ancient origin, utterly beyond his power to control at this stage. Yeah, of course, that's exactly what we were just getting at. It is of great potency. Yep. I use the word handicap advisedly for lack of a better term. I would like, however, to point out that the true significance of the situation exists in the facts that these conditions offer the opportunity to the man of evoking the understanding and point of view of the soul, for they provide the means whereby experience is gained. I have to read this again. I would like, however, to point out that the true significance of the situation exists in the fact that these conditions offer the opportunity to the man of evoking the understanding and point of view of the soul, for they provide the means whereby experience is gained. So that's what we said earlier too, right? Like we said, this is giving us something to be transmuted and transformed as we're going along here. It's already in play. We already have something that needs accomplished. We don't need any additional help, essentially. We're already working on something before we even got here. This experience will lead eventually to the soul assuming control of the mechanism, the personality, and thus giving to that soul a definite field of service. The vehicles through which the soul is seeking experience and expression are normally and naturally subject to world glamours, to the glamours of humanity as well as illusion. When the soul, in the early stages of experience, falls into the snare of Maya, of glamour, and eventually of illusion, the reason is that the soul is identifying itself with those forms and therefore with the surrounding glamour, and thus failing to achieve identification with itself, with ourself. As evolution proceeds, the nature of the problem becomes apparent to the soul in incarnation. As evolution proceeds, the nature of the problem becomes apparent to the soul in incarnation, and a process is then instituted whereby the soul frees itself from the results of wrong identification. It seems like it would have something to do with the reversing of the wheel and, some esoteric astrology and, initiation and illumination and of the like. Every soul in incarnation which succeeds in releasing its consciousness from the world of illusion and glamour is definitely serving the race and helping to free humanity from this ancient and potent thraldom. And we hear this over and over again. The further you progress on the path, the more benefit you're doing for humanity. And it's hard to see when you're just sitting and reading or contemplating or meditating in your own place, and there's nobody around you, and you're not having these deep conversations, and nobody wants to listen to you about anything that you have to say because you're essentially a conspiracy theorist because you're awake. and you see things for what they are, but even then you're seeing things as they are, but we still have to deal on the illusion parts of this during this process. So we jump from, glamour to illusion, and we're working through all this. And as we get through it, by the end of that process, the people around you are much more receptive to you and appreciate your being there now, and life begins to change quite a bit from the beginning to the end of that process, because you've now removed the emotions. You're looking at things for what they are. You can be level-headed. This is a very interesting process. There's an absolute roller coaster of a ride from getting through, this part that we're talking about, this glamour and illusion. And the illusion, it goes very deep to include that, what we're looking at is not really what we're looking at, right? We're the illusion is what we're looking at, essentially, and how that's being created, and it's still illusion. So it doesn't really stop. Just really have to withhold judgment. I can't say that enough. We just press on reading. We read DK, we meditate, we contemplate, and we don't get stuck on anything. That's what we're trying to do, right? But it must be borne in mind that when a man is nearing the stage of consciousness, when both the astral body and the mental body are active and functioning, he himself becomes a manufacturer of glamour. He struggles with forces within himself and within the world in which he lives, and the increasing potency of the inflowing soul energy, which comes in conflict with personality forces, gradually produces around him a field of glamour and an environment of illusion that brings this third category of glamour into play. Yeah, and you're also coloring the others around you who are susceptible to that, right? So this is where we must be very careful as to not be deluding others, which is, this is for those of us who are really at this point. I want to say, we're to be dissipating it, not adding to it, right? These other people are all putting, with all due respect, man, and I don't know the right words to say this or whatever, but these people are all putting their spin on things and using, these things to, for a bit of selfishness. How do they know? How do they know? They don't know. So there's this illusion. There's this really strange stuff going on, man. I would say, here's why. Here's how that works. Somebody finds astrology, they find it interesting. Maybe they have maybe they have the ability to pick up on it very quickly. That's part of them, and they're in whatever house that falls, but they're not very advanced, and they all of a sudden, next thing you know, they're training to be an astrologer, and then but don't have all the the deeper facts yet, so they're still wrapped in glamour, and now they're really making things pretty wonky out in the world with something that is supposed to be really straightforward and mental, but it's being glamored over. And then you've got everybody out there teaching these meditation techniques and pranayama and different yogas, and we really don't know what it is we're doing. It's just so wild. So I'm just saying, we have to be very careful about not deluding ourselves and others. That's all I was getting at there. These glamours are dependent upon the expression of the different forces which constitute a man's lower nature, of which he is becoming increasingly aware, and which pass through the stages of emergence into recognition, potency and expression, and violence and conflict until the struggling soul sits down, as did Arjuna, in the midst between the two opposing forces, personality force and soul energy, and asks himself, which is right, this or that? How can I distinguish where my duty or my responsibility lies? How can I find my way out of this bewildering situation? How can I bring in the control of the warrior so that the two groups of forces which I love may be resolved into a unity? How can I find my way out of this impasse? Why must I hurt that which I love and through which I have expressed myself for ages? How can I become aware of that mental illumination which will reveal the middle way between the pairs of opposites? And how can I see God, or else the forms of God? And again, if you haven't read the Bhagavad Gita, it's a good book to read, as DK talks about it a lot. This phase where Arjuna is in this battle here is rather significant. Many such questions arise in the mind of the aspirant. They indicate dilemma, bewilderment, a realization of surrounding glamour, a stage of illusion, and a condition of impotency, certainly. Against the disciple are fighting all the forces of his own nature and all those of humanity as a whole and of the planetary state. He feels helpless, inert, feeble, and hopeless, and just completely blank and just very overwhelmed at that point, right? It's an overwhelming thing. It's an emptying thing, even though that this is a different type of quiet. You have to sit down because of you just can't handle the bewilderment any longer. He cannot even see the way out. Only one clear fact remains, and that is the fact of the soul, of the immortal identity, the warrior behind the scenes, the charioteer, Krishna, the Christ within. The Bhagavad Gita can be read entirely from the standpoint of the disciples' combat with glamour, and students would be well advised so to study it. I should, it's so crazy when I talk. I don't even need to add any of my own comments to this because DK always covers everything. He doesn't miss anything. So there's that. He doesn't miss anything. And there should be a lot of comfort in that. As you hear me say something, and then he brings it up relatively quickly, to me, there's comfort in that. But it just does say that I can shut up. But the individual glamours of which the disciple becomes aware are consequently of five types of force. These, when brought into activity simultaneously, produce those glamours which are strictly initiated and produced by the man himself. They are the forces of his dense physical nature and of the vital body, which later, functioning through the dense physical nature, produce a condition of Maya, or of uncontrolled energy, right? That's the wrapping. It's just like this vortex, like we're wrapped in. That's how we kind of see it after having read this so much. It's like, it's just like a whirlwind. The forces of the astral nature, based upon desire and upon sentiency, these at this stage fall into two groups, which we call the pairs of opposites. Their potency is accentuated at this period of individual history, for the disciple is polarized in the majority of cases in his astral body and is therefore subject to the glamours produced by the interplay of opposites, plus the condition of Maya referred to above. So throw that in the mix and let's blend it up. Three, the forces of the lower nature of the chitta or mind stuff, of which the mental body is composed, the lower mental nature. This is colored by past activity, as is the substance composing all the vehicles. This adds to Maya and glamour the state of illusion. There is a hint in this. There is a deep hint in this for us. And it is based around, this is colored by past activity and is the substance composing all the vehicles. Interesting. For the personality ray, then emerges and intensifies all these three aspects of force expression, producing eventually their synthetic work. Okay. Then we have the emerging of what has been called the threefold glamorous condition into one major glamour. Well, that's the dweller, isn't it? Oh, here we're about to get into it here. So my bad. I shouldn't have said that yet. The soul ray or energy is all this time steadily increasing its rhythmic potency and seeking to impose its purpose and will upon the personality. It is the united relation and the interplay between these two which, when a point of balance has been achieved, sweeps the man onto the probationary path, onto the path of discipleship, and right up to the gate of initiation. There, standing before the gate, he recognizes the final duality which awaits resolution, the dweller on the threshold and the angel of the presence. The nature of these glamours differs with different people, and the ray quality determines the type of glamour or illusion to which a man will easily succumb, and that kind of glamour which he will most easily create. Disciples have to learn to differentiate between the glamours or glamour already existent in his environment, to which he will easily be attracted or which he will easily attract, for they constitute the line of least resistance. The glamour that he creates as he tackles life through the medium of a particular equipment, which is colored by the experiences of past incarnations and by the ray quality under which he has come into being. Let me see there. This subject is so intricate that it will serve no useful purpose for me to go into detailed particulars. I can indicate the major glamours, and under this term, I include the various Maya and illusions to which the ray types predispose the man. If you then apply these to the three vehicles of manifestation, physical, astral, and mental, as well as to the personality and to the soul, just as we did above here, you will note how complicated is the problem. Yet remember this, my brother. The issue is certain and determined for, in this solar system, the triumph of the soul and its final dominance and control is a foregone conclusion. It's a foregone conclusion. No matter how great the glamour or how fierce the strife. Thus, the ascertaining by the aspirant of his ray influence is one of the first steps towards understanding the nature of his problem and the method of release. The psychology of the future will direct attention to the discovery of the two rays which govern the soul and personality. Having done this through a study of the physical type, emotional reactions, and mental tendencies, attention will then be directed to the discovery of the rays governing the specialized vehicles. When these 5 rays, egoic, personality, physical, astral, and mental, have been approximately ascertained, then the following factors will need consideration. 1, the nature, quality, and stability of the glandular system. The point attained in evolution, this will be done by a careful consideration of the centers and the glands and their relation to each other. The recognition of the points of cleavage or the splits in the personality which exist. These can be between the etheric and physical bodies, leading to a lack of vitality, physical weakness, obsession, and many forms of difficulty. B, in the sentient astral body, leading to a vast number of problems and psychological difficulties based upon undue sensitivity, reaction to glamour in the environment, innate tendencies to glamour in the equipment, or resulting from sensitivity to the glamours of other people. C, in the mental body, imposing mental illusions of many kinds, such as control by self-created thought forms, sensitivity to existing world, national, environment thought forms of any school of thought. I don't know what that is. The sense of the dramatic or of importance, or a fanatical adherence to groups of ideas inherited from the past, or mental reactions of a purely personal nature. And D, between any of the groups of forces which we call bodies, between the etheric and astral body, between the astral and the mental bodies. There is, for instance, a definite correspondence between the condition of negativity to the physical plane living, which is the result of a lack of integration between the physical and etheric bodies, and that lack of interest and that failure to handle physical plane living, which the thinker on abstract and scientific level so frequently evidences. Both groups fail to make a definite and decisive manifestation on the physical plane. Both groups fail to deal with the problems of the physical plane living in a clear and satisfactory manner. Both are non-positive physically. Both the causes producing these relatively similar conditions are totally different, though alike in their effects. The comprehension of the path of life for an individual through a study of its astrological indications it is necessary in this connection to regard the sun sign into which a man is born as indicative of his personality trends and as embodying the characteristics which he has inherited from the past, but to regard the rising sign as holding within it the indications of the way that a man's soul would have him go. And we just said this astrology is hugely important in this, right? Understanding these basics. And in the big scheme of the esoteric books, astrology is like it's kind of just set in. It's something that we should delve into on our own and face, on our own. And there is a level of glamour or some kind of fear there of it in a lot of cases. In a lot of cases that I've seen, honestly, I'm just being honest. I see we all in the beginning have a real trepidation towards thinking that we're doing this, or that we have a big part in it, that we're not, that we're supposed to be the observer, and we're not the doer. We think we're the doer, and there's all these questions that come up there, which are all great questions, but there's this struggle in that, right? When you see what's coming, and when it does come and you learn that it is real, it's a good thing, but it's awkward watching in ourselves and others. Many other factors will warrant careful attention. The problem of the individual is complicated by certain inherited tendencies of a family, national, and racial nature. These powerfully affect the physical body in both its aspects, producing glamours of many kinds. It is also affected by certain inherited ideas, which are the embodied thought forms of family, national, and racial approaches to truth. Dude, all of these things and some more, just keep piling it on. These produce powerful illusions to which the individual man easily succumbs, of course, until you sit down and block it all out and pretty much erase everything that everyone has ever told you. And we kind of do the Arjuna thing. There are also the inflowing forces of the sign into which the sun may be passing, such as the conditions found in the world today due to the fact that our sun is passing into the new sign of the zodiac, which is Aquarius. Therefore, powerful and new energies are playing upon humanity, producing effects in all three bodies. They are evoking glamours in the emotional nature and illusions in the mental nature. Those easily subject to glamour become at this time conscious of an emphasized duality. The subject, as you will therefore see, is vast, and the science of the psychological influences and the results of their impact upon the human mechanism is, as yet, in its infancy. Certainly. I mean, this is, how could, look out with your eyeballs and look at the detail and how amazingly brilliant this is. And then we're trying to figure it out. Yeah. It's in its infancy. It's unbelievable. I have, however, indicated enough to arouse interest and to start investigation in this new field of psychological activity. To return to the consideration of the many glamours which are produced by and related to certain ray types, this will be interesting. I know we're running a bit long today, but I want to keep going anyway, because this is, let me see. We're going to finish this out. We're just going to do it. Let's consider the many glamours which are produced by the certain ray types. And it's up for us to, we should be looking at our rays, seeing which rays are affecting us at this point. William Meters, I want to say. The Theosophical Society has done some really great work that can help individuals kind of look to see the characteristics of the rays, to see if you can find yours and follow your, kind of your intuition on where you lie, where it sits. I found that to be helpful. It's really a personal thing, but we're gonna see how these rays are affecting us. Ray 1, glamour of physical strength. So ray 1 is what? That is will, right? And power. And this is we don't. Purpose. It's got the we don't fully understand what all of that energy, we don't it's more advanced than where we're at because we're in the second ray system. But at certain initiations, and the ray and the souls and this do fall into these categories. Right. So, physical strength, personal magnetism, self-centeredness, and personal potency. The one at the center, selfish personal ambition, rulership, dictatorship, and of wide control. The Messiah complex in the field of politics. Selfish destiny of the divine right of the kings personally exacted. Glamour of destruction, isolation, aloneness, aloofness, superimposed will upon others and upon groups. Man, that is crazy. And I don't mean that's crazy. It just it resonates. That's why it's crazy. Ray 2 is the glamour of love, of being love, popularity, personal wisdom, selfish responsibility, too complete an understanding, which negates right action. Self-pity, the basic glamour of this ray. Messiah complex in the world of religion and world need. Glamour of fear based on undue sensitivity. Self-sacrifice, selfish unselfishness. Self-satisfaction and selfish service. 3, glamour of being busy. Glamour of cooperation with the planet in an individual and not a group way. Glamour of active scheming, creative work without true motive. Good intention, which are basically selfish. And good intentions, which are basically selfish. Spider at the center, God in the machine, devious and continuous manipulation, self-importance from the standpoint of knowing and of efficiency. Ray 4 is harmony through, Ray 4 is the ray of harmony through conflict. This is with love wisdom, the ray of love wisdom. Creative intelligence, harmony through conflict, active intelligence. To glamour of harmony, aiming at personal comfort and satisfaction. Glamour of war, conflict, with the objective of imposing righteousness and peace. Glamour of vague artistic perception. Glamour of psychic perception instead of intuition. Glamour of musical perception. Glamour of the pairs of opposites in the higher sense. Ray 5 is glamour of materiality. Ray 5 is the just the mental plane. It's the ray of remember. I should know. I'm spacing out because this is stuff that I study all the time. I don't even this is the mental plane, and it is science, concrete mind, the rate of concrete mind. The glamour of materiality, overemphasis of form, glamour of the intellect, knowledge and of definition, of assurance based on narrow point of view, form which hides reality, organization of the outer which hides the inner. It looks like there's less glamours coming from the 5th ray. The 6th ray is the ray of idealism. All right. of devotion and idealism. And there's the glamour of devotion, the glamour of adherence to forms and persons, glamour of idealism, the glamour of loyalties and creeds, emotional response, sentimentality, interference, the lower pairs of opposites, world saviors and teachers, and of narrow vision, glamour of fanaticism. You get stuck very easily on an ideal, and then you move out on it. And you can see this playing out in a lot of ways, because the United States is a sixth ray country. The sixth ray is moving out of manifestation, making room for the seventh ray, and it's at the end of its time, and there is it's heavy. It's easily seen, especially with the United States being a sixth ray country. You can see the fanaticism and idealism playing out, heavily. All of that playing out very heavily in our country. The seventh ray is the ray of ceremonial order and magic. So when we have the glamour of magical work, relation of the opposites, subterranean powers, that which brings together the physical body, the mysterious and the secret, the glamour of sex magic, and the glamour of emerging manifested forces. Glamour of the emerging manifested forces. And this ray is coming into manifestation. This is the ray that will bring many to the portal of initiation, for the first initiation. And this is the ray heavy at between the first and second. And this is the one, dominant at the second, dominant at the third, dominant at the fourth, and so on. I have here enumerated many glamours, but their names are legion, and I have by no means covered the possibilities or the field of glamour, right? This is every different variation of this can be considered. One of the groups with which I have worked had certain characteristics and difficulties, and it might be of value if I mentioned it here. This group had a curious history in relation to other groups because its personnel changed several times. Each time, the person who left the group had been in it from karmic right and old relation to myself or to the group members, and had therefore earned the opportunity to participate in this activity. Each time they failed, and each time for personality reasons, they lacked group realization and were definitely occupied with themselves. They lacked a new and wider vision, so they eliminated themselves from this initial new age activity. I am explaining this for it is valuable to disciples to grasp the fact that karmic relation cannot be ignored and that group opportunity must be offered, even though it delay functioning in group service. Several of the group members were still struggling with glamour, and it needed a longer time for them to adjust themselves to recognition of it when encountered. The major task of this group was to dissipate some of the universal glamour by a united indicated meditation. Certain of the group members also were facing or had major adjustments in their lives, and it took a little time for the needed subjective rhythm to become established. But they all worked with understanding, perseverance, and enthusiasm, and it was not long before the group work was started. You would find it of value to consider the following questions. What is the method whereby ideas are developed from the moment of impressing the mind of some intuitive? What is the method whereby ideas are developed from the moment of impressing the mind of some intuitive? Broadly speaking, they pass through the following stages, as you have often been told. One, we have A, we have the idea based on intuitive perception. B, the ideal based on mental formulation and distribution, and C, the idol based on concretizing tendency of physical manifestation. What glamours do you feel are particularly dominant in the world today, and why? Oh, so many. Oh, so many, and so many reasons why. It just seems like, this is a cop out for now because we're not going to talk about this for that long, but it seems like all the glamours and all the reasons why right now in the world. Heavy, man. And 3, I have spoken often of the work which this group and certain other groups are intended to do in dissipating world glamour. Have you any ideas as how this should be done or what will be demanded of you? I believe you're going to get your share. That's what I believe right now. I don't, there's a lot to that. We have ideas about how this should be done. Exoteric groups coming into forming exoteric groups right now is very difficult. And DK talks about this in many of the books. Group work has been tough on the physical plane. Although there are groups trying to do it, it's still making small groups with people is very difficult with the personalities and the stages that everybody's at and the willingness to give to the group need has been proven to be very difficult. What is demanded of us anyway is what I want to say is we press on and we become more inclusive and we become more clear and we get rid of the glamour and we push through the glamours and illusions ourselves. And that's the work that we can do and that I feel like we are doing as it comes to us. But all right, we're going to call it there for the day. Sorry, that was pretty long, but we got through that section. It was just really too interesting to stop, and there was not a real good stopping point. So it's better to have it loaded up into that one section, I think. All right, have a good day. See you again tomorrow for contrast between the higher and lower glamours.